Why do most men lose money on Wall Street? Not some of them, not many of them, most of them. They study the market, they read books, they follow prices and listen to advice. Some believe they understand what they are doing, and yet, in the end, they lose. For many years, I asked myself the same question. My name is James R. Keene. I spent much of my life observing speculation, not only the movement of prices, but the behavior of the men behind them. Because markets are not driven by numbers alone, they are driven by decisions, and decisions are rarely as rational as men believe. Over time, I noticed something that most traders never seem to understand. They do not lose because the market is too difficult. They lose because they behave like everyone else. New York City, at the turn of the century. The financial district was filled with men who believed they had discovered opportunity. Brokerage offices were crowded from morning to evening. The sound of ticker tape machines filled the rooms, printing prices faster than most could follow, while orders arrived constantly, carried by messengers or shouted across the trading floor. To an outsider, it looked like activity. To those inside, it felt like certainty. Men spoke with confidence about the trades they were making. Some had already seen profits and believed they had found a reliable method, while others were entering the market for the first time, convinced that success was only a matter of learning a few simple rules. They believed the market rewarded knowledge, but that is not what I observed. Because knowledge alone rarely protects a man in speculation. What matters is behavior, and behavior on Wall Street tends to follow a very predictable pattern. A man enters the market carefully. He studies, he waits, he considers his decisions. At first he is cautious, he respects risk, he questions himself. Then something changes. A profitable trade, a successful decision. Confidence begins to grow. He trades again and again. His positions become larger, his decisions become faster. What once required thought now feels obvious. And slowly, without noticing it, he begins to trade not with discipline, but with belief. Belief that he understands the market, belief that he can predict its movement, belief that this time will be different. I have seen this transformation more times than I can count. It happens quietly, gradually, and by the time a man recognizes it, he is no longer observing the market. He is part of the crowd. Most traders never realize when that moment arrives because it does not feel like a mistake. It feels like progress. And that is where the real danger begins. Because the market has a way of treating the crowd very differently from the individual, and once a man begins to think like everyone else, he usually begins to lose like them as well. Most men who enter the market believe they understand the reason others lose. They believe the problem is knowledge. They say the market is too complex, that it requires experience, better information, a deeper understanding of numbers and reports. Some spend years studying charts, patterns, and strategies, convinced that success is only a matter of learning more than the next man. At first, this belief appears reasonable. After all, the market does reward those who understand it better than others. But knowledge alone has never been enough. I have known men on Wall Street who could explain the market in perfect detail. They understood companies, balance sheets, and economic conditions better than most. They spoke with confidence about trends and opportunities, and yet when it came time to trade, they lost money just as consistently as those who knew very little. Because knowledge does not control behavior, and behavior is what determines the outcome of every trade. In the brokerage offices, I often listened to conversations between traders who believed they had discovered the reason for their previous losses. Some blamed poor timing, others blamed bad advice. Many believed they had simply been unlucky. Few of them considered a simpler explanation, that their own decisions might be the problem. It is easier for a man to believe the market is difficult than to accept that his own behavior is predictable, because predictable behavior can be used against him. On Wall Street, patterns repeat themselves not only in prices but in people. A trader sees a market moving upward and hesitates. He waits for confirmation, for a clearer signal, for reassurance that the move is real. By the time he is convinced, the opportunity has already advanced. He enters late, when risk is highest and reward is smallest. Then the market begins to move against him. At first, he holds his position. He believes the movement is temporary. He tells himself the market will return to its previous direction. He waits, hoping to be proven right. But the market does not respond to hope. Losses grow, pressure increases, and eventually, when the discomfort becomes too great, he closes the position, often at the worst possible moment. And once he exits, the market begins to move in the direction he originally expected. This pattern repeats itself again and again, not because the market is unpredictable, but because human behavior is. Men hesitate when they should act, they act when they should wait, they hold when they should exit, and they exit when they should hold. And through all of this, they continue believing that the problem lies somewhere outside themselves. They search for better strategies, better information, better timing. But the truth is rarely complicated. The market does not require perfection. It requires discipline. And discipline is something most men lose long before they lose their money, because speculation places a man in constant conflict with himself. Fear and confidence move through him with every change in price. Small profits encourage him. Small losses disturb him. And over time, these emotions begin shaping his decisions more than any knowledge he has acquired. This is why most traders lose, not because they do not understand the market, but because they do not understand themselves. And a man who does not understand his own behavior will always struggle to survive in a market that depends on it. Over time, I began to understand that losses on Wall Street follow a pattern, not in the market, but in the men who trade it. A man enters with caution. He observes, he studies, he respects the uncertainty of speculation. In the beginning, he is patient, because he has not yet convinced himself that he understands what he is doing. Then he experiences success. A profitable trade, perhaps two. And that is where the pattern begins to change. Because success in speculation can be more dangerous than failure. Failure teaches caution. It forces a man to slow down, to question himself, to reconsider his approach. But success does something else. It builds confidence, and confidence, if left unchecked, begins to replace discipline. The trader starts to believe his results are the product of skill. He begins to trust his judgment more than the market itself. And from that moment, his decisions begin to change. He enters trades more quickly. He increases the size of his positions. He begins to act with less hesitation because hesitation now feels unnecessary. What once required careful thought now feels obvious. This is how behavior shifts, not suddenly but gradually. A trader does not wake up one morning and decide to become reckless. He simply becomes more comfortable with risk, and comfort in speculation is rarely a good sign. Because the market rewards discipline, not confidence. As this process continues, the trader begins to trade more frequently. He sees opportunities everywhere. Every movement appears meaningful. Every fluctuation seems to offer a chance for profit. He is no longer waiting for the right moment. He is searching for any moment. And in doing so, he places himself in constant exposure to the market. This is where most losses begin, not with one large mistake, but with many small decisions made without patience. The trader begins to react instead of observe. He follows movements instead of anticipating them. He becomes part of the flow of the market rather than an observer of it. And when a man becomes part of the crowd, his decisions begin to resemble the decisions of everyone around him. He buys when others are buying. He sells when others are selling. He feels confidence when prices rise and fear when they fall. He is no longer acting independently. He is responding. This is the moment when the market gains its advantage. Because the market does not need to outthink a man who has already stopped thinking for himself. It only needs to move in a way that forces him to act. And once a trader begins reacting to the market instead of observing it, his decisions become predictable. He enters too late. He exits too early. He increases risk at the wrong time and reduces it when opportunity appears. I have seen this cycle repeat itself countless times. Different men, different years, the same behavior, the same outcome. Because while markets change, human nature does not. And a man who cannot control his own behavior will always find himself on the wrong side of the market. The market does not need to defeat a man directly, it only needs to wait. Because once a trader begins acting like the crowd, the outcome becomes a matter of time. At first, nothing appears unusual. The trader continues making decisions, continues entering positions, continues believing that the next trade will confirm what the previous one suggested. He still feels in control. He still believes the results depend on his understanding. But the market has already begun to shift the conditions around him, not in a way that is obvious, in a way that is subtle. Prices begin to move just enough to create uncertainty, not enough to cause panic, but enough to make decisions more difficult. A position that once felt comfortable now requires attention. A small loss begins to grow. A profitable trade begins to reverse. The trader reacts. He adjusts his position. He closes one trade and opens another. He tries to correct what he believes is a temporary mistake. But each adjustment brings him further into the movement of the market, further into reaction. This is how the market gains control. Not through force, through behavior. Because a man who is reacting cannot think clearly. His decisions become shorter, faster, less considered. He focuses on the immediate movement of price instead of the broader structure. He becomes sensitive to every fluctuation, and that sensitivity begins to guide his actions. At this stage, the trader is no longer making independent decisions. He is responding to pressure, and pressure in speculation rarely leads to good outcomes. The market begins to test him, a small move against his position, then a larger one. Not enough to destroy him at once, but enough to increase discomfort, enough to force him into a decision. Should he hold? Should he exit? Should he increase his position? Every choice now feels urgent, and urgency is the enemy of discipline. Because discipline requires patience, and patience is difficult to maintain when a man feels pressure building around him. This is where most traders begin to lose control, not because the market has done something unexpected, but because they can no longer remain still. They begin to act in order to relieve discomfort, not because the market has presented a clear opportunity. They close positions at a loss simply to end the tension. They enter new trades immediately, hoping to recover what was lost. They increase risk at the worst possible moment. And through all of this, they believe they are responding intelligently to the market. But they are not. They are being guided by it. The market does not need to predict a trader's decisions. It only needs to create conditions where his behavior becomes predictable. And once that happens, the outcome is rarely in his favor. Because the same emotions that drive him to act are the emotions that the market exploits. Fear forces him to exit, hope convinces him to stay, confidence encourages him to risk more, and uncertainty prevents him from acting when it matters most. This is how the market works. Not by overpowering men, but by placing them in situations where their own behavior works against them. And by the time most traders recognize what is happening, they have already made too many decisions influenced by emotion. They are no longer trading the market. They are reacting to it. And once a man reaches that point, the market rarely needs to do anything more, because he will begin doing the rest himself. After watching this process repeat itself for many years, I began to understand something that most traders never consider. The market does not need to be complicated. It only needs to be consistent, because the behavior of men is remarkably consistent. Different faces appear on Wall Street each year. New traders arrive convinced they will succeed where others have failed. They bring new ideas, new strategies, new confidence, and for a time, some of them do succeed. But the pattern remains the same. They begin with discipline. They respect the market. They wait, they observe, they control their risk. In those early stages, they behave like individuals. Then success begins to change them. They become more certain. They act more quickly. They trust their judgment more than their process. And slowly, without noticing it, they begin to behave like the very traders they once believed they were different from. They become part of the crowd. And once that happens, the outcome rarely changes. I have stood in brokerage offices and watched men follow this path step by step. I have seen confidence grow into overconfidence, patience turn into urgency and discipline disappear under the pressure of constant decision-making. The market does not need to defeat these men. They defeat themselves, because the greatest difficulty in speculation is not understanding the market. It is maintaining control over one's own behavior. A man may study charts, read reports, and learn every detail about the companies he trades. But if he cannot remain patient, if he cannot control his reactions, if he cannot wait when waiting is required, all of that knowledge becomes secondary. The market rewards those who can remain still and punishes those who feel the need to act. This is a difficult truth for many to accept, because activity feels productive, making decisions feels like progress. But in speculation, the opposite is often true. The more a man acts without discipline, the further he moves from success. And the more he allows his behavior to be shaped by the movement of the market, the more predictable his decisions become. That is why so many traders lose, not because the market is impossible to understand, but because it is difficult to remain unchanged by it. Because the longer a man stays in the market, the more it begins to influence how he thinks, how he feels, and how he acts. And unless he is aware of that influence, he will begin to follow it. The crowd is not a fixed group of men. It is a state of mind. And any trader, given enough time and pressure, can become part of it. That is the lesson the market teaches again and again, not loudly, but consistently. And those who fail to learn it usually discover the truth in the same way, through loss. In the end, the answer to the question is not difficult to find. Why do most men lose money on Wall Street? Not because the market is too complex, not because information is hidden from them, and not because opportunity does not exist. They lose because they do not remain the same. They enter the market with discipline, but they do not keep it. They begin with patience, but they do not protect it. They start as observers, but over time they become participants in the very behavior they once believed they could avoid. And once that change takes place, the outcome becomes familiar. Because the market does not reward intention. It rewards consistency. A man may know what he should do. He may understand when to act and when to wait. But if he cannot apply that knowledge with discipline, if he cannot remain unchanged by the movement around him, then understanding alone will not protect him. This is what I learned after many years of watching speculation. The difference between those who survive and those who do not is rarely found in intelligence or information. It is found in behavior. The ability to remain patient when others are acting. The ability to remain still when the market appears to offer endless opportunity. The ability to do nothing when doing nothing is the correct decision. These are not easy things, because the market constantly invites action. It offers movement, noise, and the illusion of opportunity at every moment. It encourages men to believe they must participate, that they must respond, that they must always be involved. But that belief is what leads most of them to failure, because the market does not require constant participation. It requires selective action. And those who cannot make that distinction often find themselves trading not because they should, but because they feel they must. That is where losses begin, and that is why they continue. My name is James R. Keene, and after many years observing the markets and the men who believed they understood them, I learned one lesson that remains as true today as it was then. Most men do not lose because they lack knowledge. They lose because they cannot remain disciplined in a place that constantly challenges it. And in the end, the market does not need to defeat them. It only needs to wait.